Oh, there is Anida. Welcome. Hello, welcome. My name is Tihomir Loza. And before we go any further, I just wanted to tell you that this event is being streamed, which also means it is being recorded. The event is organized by SEENPM, the network that I coordinate. Quite a few of my colleagues from the network are speakers and panel and the moderators at the sessions. SEENPM is a network of media centers and institutes in Central and Southeast Europe. The other organizer of this event is Media Center Sarajevo, one of our founding members. And we do today's event in collaboration with IFEX. The event is just an attempt to try to explore the impact of hate campaigns, of these hateful environments that journalists work in, on their safety and their independence, their work in general, really. We will have 3 sessions. Each will feature very distinguished speakers. You will be able to put your questions in the chat facility, as well as this other facility which says Q&A, question and answer. Your choice. We will try to address the most interesting questions towards the end of each sessions. 3 colleagues from the network will moderate the session. They are Elvira Jukic-Mujkic. She edits Media Center's website, media.ba. Sasha Lekovic, he's the founder of Investigative Journalism Center from Croatia, and more recently, the founder of Fažana Media Fest. And then we have Brankica Petković of Peace Institute in Ljubljana. Brankica often coordinates our research activities. She will moderate the first panel discussion. And without further ado, I hand over to Brankica. Brankica, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tihomir. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this first panel discussion. It is devoted to the topic hate narratives and media trust. And this is the first part of today's discussion on journalists as targets of hate and how hate campaigns influence journalist safety and independence. As Tiho said, we have distinguished speakers today in this first panel. They are Anida Sokol, my colleague media researcher at Media Center Sarajevo, then Nazan Özcan, editor-in-chief of Bianet in Turkey, and Nataša Kovačev, a journalist at Euronews in Serbia. She was until recently a journalist of N1 television in Serbia. So in this first panel, at the beginning, Anida will start as a keynote speaker, and she will shortly present what was almost 1-year-long research action focused on hate and propaganda media and communication and on media trust in 6 countries of the Western Balkans and also Turkey. So this research included 3 research activities, 3 followed each other since May last year. And it has been a part of the regional project that our network, SEENPM, is coordinating, called Resilience, Civil Society for Media Free of Hate and Disinformation. So now I invite my colleague Anida Sokol, media researcher, as I said, at Media Center Sarajevo, to present introductory thoughts on a topic of this panel. Please, Anida.
Thank you very much, Brankica, for the introduction, and thank you also for the great job you have done in coordinating the research studies and being the regional editor of the research studies that I will present today. It is a very difficult task, I have to say, to present the research results within 10 minutes, but I will try really to be brief. So what we have done in this within the project, as Brankica has mentioned, within the project Resilience, that gathered media development organizations from the region, we did a collection of research studies. So first is focused on the propaganda, disinformation, and hate models in the media and communication, then on hate narratives in the media, and then also on the public trust in the media, so in Western Balkans and Turkey. And there were also national studies and also regional overviews with all the national studies in that regional overviews. So what the first regional overview has concluded, and it was written by Sandra Bašić-Hrvatin, Brankica Petković, and Sanela Hodžić, is that there are really numerous examples of disinformation, propaganda, and hate models in the media and communication in the region, and some of them being very powerful and influential. What is very problematic and worrying is that these are really not marginal instances, but really significant parts of the media system in the region that are established and maintained systematically for political and other ends. So the public in the region is really being exposed to these narratives and models, while on the other hand, highly professional media outlets are really struggling to keep up their audiences, to keep up their revenues, and they're facing pressures and really lack sustainability. The other regional overview, we focused in this other part on the examples of hate narratives against migrants and refugees, political opposition, and journalists. So I will be focusing more on this last part, hate narratives against journalists. And what these examples showed, and it's in all the countries of the region, is that these narratives are similar. And they are present both in the traditional media, non-traditional media, and in user-generated comments. What these narratives do is they label negatively the other. So whether it's political opposition, migrants and refugees, journalists, and they portray disagreement as treason. So there are even platforms and traditional media that generate and spread hate narratives directly against these target groups, but even more so, there are more platforms that contribute to this negative presentation of these groups. So for example, they focus on negative events, such as, for example, in the case of migrants and refugees, and do not provide alternative views. And these hate narratives really escalate in user comments that are really packed with hate speech, xenophobic sentiments, stigmatization, etc. And they're also distributed by both political bots and by part of the general public. Now I will focus on the hate narratives against journalists, because really this is the topic of our meeting today. And across the region, these hate narratives really involve similar content. So journalists who are critical towards the political and ethno-national current and ruling regimes that reveal corruption scandals, that write about connection between the government and business groups, are really often portrayed as the enemies of the state, as those who betrayed the group. So that group perhaps is a political group or an ethno-national group or a nation. So they are portrayed in these narratives as traitors, as enemies, and also often as foreign mercenaries. So someone paid them to do that. So they did not do this, they didn't do it on their own for public interest, but they were paid to do this. And what is really troublesome is that these narratives that also come from the mainstream media, the media that are supported by the current governments, or some more radical platforms on the internet. So they're rarely condemned. So they're condemned by the Association of Journalists, or they're condemned by civil society organizations, but they're really rarely condemned by high-ranking politicians, by other public figures. And this really is a huge concern. Some of the examples that I will show is the case of Nikola Vučić, who was being portrayed by some portals in Herzegovina as a traitor of the Croat people due to his comment sarcastic comment on Twitter that one canton, he wrote about fascism in one canton with the Croat majority. So he was being labeled as halal Croat, so a Croat who betrayed his people, etc. Then there is also the case of Ana Lalic, who wrote critically about the lack of capacities in the clinical center of Vojvodina during the pandemic of COVID-19. And then she was labeled by some mainstream media outlets and other platforms as a liar, as someone who is writing against the state, etc. We tried, by looking at these examples in every country, we tried to put all the narratives, main narratives and sub-narratives into a group. So this is how the table looks like. So the main narrative, hate narrative against journalists, is really portraying journalists as foreign mercenaries and as morally corrupt people, while the sub-narratives are that they are enemies of the state, that they are betrayers of their group, for example, ethno-national group, that they are politically affiliated, that they are mercenaries, often foreign mercenaries, that they are liars without honor and shame, that they are corrupted, that they publish fake news, etc. Nedim Sejdinović is in his article that has been recently published on Media.ba, that is entitled "How to Become a Traitor of Your Own People," said that you can become a traitor in 3 ways. So you can report critically on the government, you can reveal corruption scandals, so connection between the government and crime, and you can point to some other problems in the functioning of the government and the state apparatus. And really, across the region, there are so many examples of traitors, journalists being traitors of their own people. So these include, for example, Stevan Dojčinović, editor-in-chief of Krik, then journalists Tanja Šuković and Snežana Rakonjac from Montenegro, Borjan Jovanovski from North Macedonia, Visar Duriki from Kosovo, etc. So all journalists that wrote critically either against about their governments or revealed certain corruption scandals. What is, again, even more worrisome is that often these narratives come from the mainstream or tabloid media. So the media attacking their colleagues, the media attacking the journalists. So here are some examples. For example, Dnevni Avaz has really been leading a campaign against the members of the fact-checking platform Raskrinkavanje. And this campaign is really based on assumptions, on allegations, on accusations. Then another is our tabloid media targeting the members of Krik in Serbia. What we tried to connect and to see whether these narratives influence the public's trust in the media and whether they influence public's attitudes towards the media. And we think they do. They do, and this has been pointed also during focus groups discussions with the media representatives that were held as part of this these research studies. So the last part of our research studies is, as I mentioned initially, is the public opinion poll carried out in all the countries of the region, through which we wanted to see what is the public trust in the media, and what are the public's attitudes towards media outlets. So what these polls that have been conducted in every country revealed is that there is really a high polarization of the public concerning information sources they use and trust. So television is still the most trusted and the most used source of news and information in the region. But at the same time, there are so many television channels that are really politically motivated and spreading political propaganda. Social networks are the second most used source, and this is a bit troublesome because we know that a lot of these narratives are social networks. However, there is a larger distrust towards social networks. According to the poll, citizen preferences are driven by different factors, and there is really an ethical and ethnic and political divisions when it comes to trust and distrust, especially in public service broadcasters. So in the studies, you can really see a lot of graphs, a lot of that portray these and that show these results. So this is one graph summarizing the public's trust in the media in the region, and you can see that it's really polarized. When it comes to public's attitudes, are really conflicting. So on one hand, the polls show that half of the citizens believe that media outlets in the country serve democracy, that they serve public interest, that that the media can freely report on important topics, while on the other hand, there is really a high percentage of negative attitudes towards the media. So mostly that the media are politically controlled, that they are under the influences of political and business powers, that there is a lack of independent, impartial media, that media spread political propaganda and disinformation, etc. So really polarized and sometimes conflicting answers that are also a result of all the issues that I mentioned before in the media. So these are some graphs showing factors related to trust and distrust in the media. What are the conclusions? So the studies, and especially the regional overviews, really give a lot of conclusions to the sector, and these conclusions involve different segments, so that we really need to find ways how to limit political influence on the media outlets. How to limit the influence of the groups that spread hate, disinformation, and propaganda. Other thing is that these polls also show that the levels of media information literacy are really not that high, and that there is really a need to educate people on media information literacy, to show them what are professional media outlets, who are professional journalists, that professional journalists are not enemies, are not traitors, etc., and what are non-professional media outlets, because a lot of times the public doesn't know to differentiate between the two. And then there is really a need to protect the journalists and to condemn these narratives, because so far, as I mentioned, these hate narratives, especially against journalists, haven't been condemned by high-ranking politicians, by public figures, by influencers, etc. So really, I think it's really high time that we start to speak more about them, and that also important, influential people within the governments and different institutions also start speaking against these narratives, because that they can really have a large influence on the public. So thank you very much, and I hope I was within the time frame, and if you have any questions, so I will gladly answer them later.
Thank you, Anida. Thank you. It was a bit longer introduction, but very useful and difficult to summarize. So long elaborated research studies, and I invite all our participants to visit SEENPM website and find all these reports. Now I would like to hear from our two colleagues, journalists from Turkey and Serbia, about how they see this and experience this hate environment and the origin of this type of media and narratives, and how they affect their work. First, maybe Nazan, if you can start with your experience and views, please.
Hello again. Probably you know that saying, what is personal, also political and public. So first, in the beginning, I would like to share a story of mine. It was 2008. I was working as an editor in a weekend edition called Radical 2. And at that time, I remember the date, 18th of January 2008. I was a, let's say, junior or junior senior editor, and a colleague of mine who is senior called me to publish his article in my magazine. His name was Dink. He sent his piece. Dink was an Armenian Turkish journalist who launched Armenian Turkish first Armenian, not first, but very important newspaper called Agos, and he was covering all this democracy and equality thing in Turkey in his newspaper. He called me and he said he would like to send an article for us. I said, okay, send it please. And then he sent the article. And I remember the headline. The headline was "The Dove-like Disquiet of My Heart." Maybe I can say it's like it's like saying the fear of a dove. And he was writing what was he is living during that time, because of his Armenian, although he's Turkish citizen, but originally Armenian. He was born in Turkey, raised in Turkey. He was Turkish citizen. And he was writing about all these things and all the threats, all the hate speeches, all the harassments that he was facing for a long time with the judicial system, with the people, from the public, from the political power. And he was telling this situation he was living, that once he said, I am not a Turk, I'm Armenian. Then the prosecutor just sued him because he was insulted Turkishness. And he was telling all this stupid, I'm sorry, but there is no word to say, these things, and also messages from public and messages from other journalists insulting him, harass him. And he was he said that I am really unhappy, and I know what I said. I'm never insulting Turkishness. I never insult anyone, and I'm just telling the truth, and I will continue to tell, and I will continue to struggle to fight against with them in court. Unfortunately, in Turkey, it's always like this. Nationalism and conservatism is very high, and unfortunately, this nationalist and kind of racist people threatened him several times, and he was telling his story and his fear and his how to say, feelings, because he said, I'm frightened. And in Turkey, many people, let me tell you, I would like to, I try to find his words. He argued with a nationalist or maybe racist lawyer over on television, and he said if the court says I insulted the Turkishness, in that case, I will leave this country. If the court decides like that. And unfortunately, the court decided like that. Then he said, I will go to European Union, European Human Rights Court. Yeah. And then he was finishing his article like this, because everyone in public began to point him with finger. That Armenian who insulted Turkish became a big campaign. And at the end of his article, he was saying, I am just like a dog, my gaze fleets right, left, forward, back. My head is just fidgety and quick to turn. But he was hopeful. He was continuing like this. But as these things happen, I will find reassurance in the fact that while I may view my current state of mind, my current state of soul, as being marked by the disquiet characteristic of those, I know that it is in this country, nobody ever hurts, ever touches those. Those live their lives in the heart of cities, amid the crowds and human bustle. Yes, they will live. Yes, they will live a little uneasily, a little apprehensively, but they live freely too. I just wrote this long story, and I called him back. I said, Mr. Dink, it was perfect piece, but unfortunately too long for us. Could you please re-edit it and send it back to us, and we can print it next week? He said, of course, I can do that. And it was, I remember very clearly, it was Thursday, and we come to conclusion that he will re-edit it and will send it to us, to me again, and we will print it out next week. It was Thursday, and on Friday, next day, I was working at the newspaper, the television was open, and I was just heard something, Dink killed. I just turned the television, and really he was killed. And unfortunately, we can't make the dog live in this country, because and then after that we learned that a young man, 17 years old young man, who get this big propaganda that Armenian insulted Turkishness, believed that and killed him. Of course.
To slowly move to Nataša,
Okay.
do you want to make, or maybe just to summarize that this is particularly and historically now, because this assassination on Mr. Dink in a way it has changed the how to say, the media landscape and the human rights landscape in Turkey and across Europe. This case is still very relevant, and it witnesses the case in Turkey of how, let's say, minority journalists, particularly Armenian, what kind of hate can experience, and finally being killed for that. But there are also in our research on hate narratives in Turkey targeting journalists also current cases, and we can talk later about your experience and so on. Maybe Nataša, your experience. Turkey and Serbia were identified in the research. Anida presented our research as particular two countries in this region and this project that where hate media and propaganda narratives, hate narratives are practically dominant. They are not marginal, and the overall media system is practically captured by this type of media, of course, as it is allowed for them to be central part of media system by the governments of these two countries. Nataša, what is your view about it and experience, how this influence your work?
Thank you for letting me be one of the participants. And I'd like to say that what we just heard from Nazan is really disturbing, very disturbing. Fortunately, we don't have examples like that today in Serbia. I'd say not yet, actually, that somebody is being killed on the street because of the propaganda against him in the media. But for sure, there is a lot of propaganda, a lot of fake news. And let's say that the media doesn't always or don't always look out for the standards, ethical standards of journalism, and they usually just look at their own interest, how to put a larger number of click bites, how to sell a lot of papers, but also how to send a message. I think that it's actually one part of a big propaganda machine. When somebody is, let's say, not wanted anymore, how to say it differently, then you can start all the machinery against him. And fake news is just one small part of that big machinery, because then you have to spend most of your time and most of your efforts to try to explain that fake news is actually not true, that it's fake, and you have to explain yourself. You have to, I don't know, instead of doing your job, instead of just saying, I don't care, that's not true, and that's it. Why? Because a lot of the audience, a lot of people out there will believe in what they hear, in what they see on social networks, unfortunately, and therefore they will look at you as a traitor, as somebody who took money, as Anida said, mercenaries, you know, somebody who took money to do things against your country, etc. So what Anida said actually in the beginning, that there are three groups: hate speech against migrants, against political opposition, and against journalists. I would say that it's all combined together in that last part, because as journalists, we are usually connected to both other groups. They will put you down or call you a traitor, or call you, say that you are very close to the opposition if you are criticizing some of the government decisions. So you are then a journalist who is working for the opposition. You are not a journalist who is just doing their job and criticizing some of the decisions that one part of the population thinks is wrong. Also about the migrants, it's, let's say, if you cover, especially today in Serbia, it's a big topic. Still, it's a big topic, and in the previous years as well. And the mindset of the people is slowly changing. You know, in the beginning of the migrant crisis, they were looking at it very differently. They were they showed more hospitality. They were more eager to help them, because they knew that they're just on their way to Europe. They will not stay in Serbia. Today it's changing, because many people are actually stuck here. They still want to go further on to Europe, but they can't because the borders are closed. So a lot of them stay in Serbia, and now it's beginning a problem for people here. They are seeing it as a problem. And if you as a journalist are reporting on this migrant crisis from a human perspective and showing their point of view and what those people are going through while being here in Serbia, what are their wishes, how the journey looked like for them, then you are also a traitor. You're also somebody who wants to put all these migrants into empty houses in Serbia. That was my case, because after some of the stories about the migrants, but after another occasion that was actually very, very, let's say, close to the church, Serbian Orthodox Church, I had a situation where on the social networks, they put out my picture, and fake news, actually a fake statement. They said that I wrote, or I said that all the migrants should be placed into empty houses in Serbia, and that the Serbian Orthodox Church is the only institution who is trying to prevent it, and that it should be like banned from doing that or something like that. So it was a fake statement that spread very quickly all through social media, and you can just imagine all the comments that happened after that. And
let us, Nataša, stop here for a moment to tell us what you can, and maybe later also Nazan, what you can and what means do you have to defend your safety and to defend you from being target of this hate? Do you put them on the court, call for a regulator to intervene? What do you do? Do you have help of your media outlet, your colleagues? How you can counter this type of attacks?
Well, it is very difficult because it's social media, and it spreads like fire.
Can you report it to the Facebook or Twitter?
Yes, I tried. No, I tried to do it, but they didn't react on my on my messages. So I did have a lot of help from my colleagues, because a lot of them put out that picture on their social media and saying this is a lie, this is awful, and something like that. So it came to a great number of people. And I was very lucky because also fake news, it's a portal in Novi Sad in Serbia that actually deals with fake news. It tries to decompose that untrue stories. They called me the next day and asked me, did you say this? I said, no, never. And then they actually put out a statement and a story that it was fake news, and that's not correct. So many news outlets actually reported on that. They took this statement. So
in a way, the journalist community mobilized to counter this.
Yes, that was very good. And I just want to say that I had a lot of help also from people who are here dealing with these attacks on journalists. They called me, in fact, Veran Matic, who is dealing with this for a long time. He called me several times asking me, did you report this to someone? Did you call the lawyers of N1 television that I was working for at the moment? And he also did a lot of work. He himself contacted the administrators of the social network, the group where it showed for the first time, and he also asked them to remove it, and said he would put out a threat or a lawsuit and something like that. So actually it became calm after a few days.
Okay.
But in the beginning it was very bad.
Terrible, yes. Let us just check with Tihomir, because these are the last 10 minutes of this first panel, if we have any question, or to give floor to colleagues in the audience. If not, we will continue.
Thanks, Brankica. We do have at least one question that could be addressed, and that's from Jason. Jason Gold. He makes a point that a lot of NGOs in the region obviously get funding from the European Union, that we've seen a big rise in populism throughout the region, not just in the Balkans, but also Central Europe, etc. That quite a few media outlets are now advocates of these new populist tendencies. You can go into question and answer and see the question for yourself. It's more elaborate than that, than this. But he's basically saying that the NGOs are quite often silent about this new situation. It's his comment, and I suppose the question, why do we think that NGOs are silent, if indeed we agree that they are silent?
Yes. Do we want to answer, do Nataša or Nazan, do you have any answer about the role of NGOs often supported by European funds and donors, and then their role in countering populism, hate speech, and particularly governments taking such role? Nazan?
Yeah, hi. I don't believe that NGOs don't take action or don't make statements on it, but as I look to Turkey, I'm sorry, I'm thinking a lot of things, but I can't say them. Sorry.
It's okay, just you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Let me tell you like this. In Turkey, the press controlled by governments, and let's say maybe 19% of the press controlled by government for a long time, and we are only 10%. And I know too many NGOs working for journalists and unions also. They always make statements, make marches, or try to make announcements like that this is fake news, or this is not right to talk like this. And they try their best, but unfortunately, if the press also, if the press, the 90% of press controlled by government, in that case, you can't hear their voice.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
It's impossible. Only 10% of
media space they have.
They have, and it's like we are talking with each other, because we know it's wrong, and the NGOs states that it's wrong, and only 10% of audiences, also readers and media and NGOs, and this is really a big, how to say, tragedy for all countries, because most of the media controlled by government, so you can make your voice louder.
Yes, yes. Okay, Nataša, your view on this, if we keep this question as our final point, maybe just to say that in our research, we also, particularly when we discuss media trust, and what Anida pointed, this polarization and this kind of lack of media literacy, and people, our citizens, losing, how to say, the trust in and also understanding of the situation. It seems to me that civil society organizations are on generally, I don't say not at all, but they are quite active in keeping this and trying also to contribute to understanding and to media literacy of citizens. What is the case in Serbia?
Well, I agree with Nazan a great part, because actually that's true. I mean, the NGO sector is not silent. You just cannot hear them in most of the media out here. And it really does feel like we are talking to each other, you know. And on the other hand, you mentioned polarization. I think it's a big problem in Serbia. It's a huge problem, because either you are with us or you are against us. That's the vibe here, actually. It goes for the media outlets, it goes for the NGO sector, it goes for everybody who wants to do anything. So whenever you try to criticize something, then you are put on the side of opposition, and you are working together with them, you are with them, and a big part of the public actually perceives or sees this in that particular way. So they don't even try to hear the arguments, to like think critically about things. No, if and actually the statements of politicians don't help. That's the biggest problem, because if a politician goes out and calls one of those NGOs like somebody who is working against the interests of this country, or somebody who is pro-opposition political parties and the media who are actually the opposition media, then all the public who is watching those media, listening to those media, who are coordinated by people who are close to the government, then they will see it that way. And that's the big problem, because we don't have a way to get to them. And actually, I just wanted to say that this polarization being such a big problem, it made huge problems for me in doing my job, because I couldn't get the other side. You know, whenever I tried to work on a story, I always had one side, you know, citizens who are against, who have a problem, who want to tell us about that problem, and the NGO who will also say something about it, for example, but I will never get the other side, the government, somebody from the local government who is actually there to deal with the problem. And it was very, very hard and difficult for me to work in that circumstances, you know, because they just didn't want to talk to me, because I was working for a television they thought was close to the opposition political parties, and that's it. And I was against them. I wasn't a journalist in their eyes. I was somebody who is the enemy. So yes. I hope that it will be different today in this.
What we also concluded, Nataša, is that this producing of distrust in journalists as professionals, is journalism as profession, and in media as independent organization, is essential part of the populism and politicians in power and political parties in power around us. So this polarization is their program, you know, and also producing distrust in media. So how to, I would like to ask both of you, as Tihomir allowed me to extend a bit this discussion for a few minutes. Have you thought about way out? Where do you have your still trust in your profession and your wish to stay in this profession? Where do you see motivation for it, and way out for us as a societies? My colleague in this research, Sandra Bašić-Hrvatin, quoted some foreign research, and that was a bit optimistic, saying that this polarization, when you go deeper into research, is not so a common feature among citizens. the citizens, a lot of citizens still know what is right and what is not right, you know. And that is a kind of optimism, how to build on that and how to empower that feeling and that human approach of citizens not being manipulated. Where do you see the light?
Actually, I think that the only light is in people who are doing their job professionally. You know, in every media outlet, whether it is a media that is, let's say, orchestrated by the government, whether it is an independent media, I think that everywhere you have people who are doing their job properly and those who are not, on both sides of the polarized society, because even in those independent media, not always will all the colleagues try to get the other side, to hear their answers, to try to ask the questions. You know, they will just assume that they will not get the answer and they will not try. It's not good. It's actually wrong. For me, it's a wrong step. You know, you have to do it. It's your job. So every time, whoever I'm working for, whether it was N1 or now Euronews television, or I don't know, Al Jazeera before that, or Radio Television Vojvodina, or whatever. I mean, you have to do your job in the same way, in the same manner. You
Okay,
know what are the rules of your profession, and you have to follow them. So that's the only light I see.
Okay, and Nazan, for you, where do you see for Turkey and difficult circumstances the way out? And
maybe
hope.
hope.
You said earlier in women, as you had protests yesterday.
Yes. Maybe I find the hope in my profession, in journalism, because journalism is kind of being a voice of voiceless people. So this is very, very important. This is very, how to say, very important thing to continue, because if I am not doing my profession, if I am not a journalist, there are too many people who can't raise their voice to the public. So it's very important for me. And personally, I find a little bit hope. Nothing ends forever. I just survived radical, as I told my a kind of my colleague killed, and we at that Hrant Dink's funeral, it was really, really, really crowded. It was perfect. Of course, I wish he never killed, and I never wanted to see his that kind of funeral. Then I survived Cumhuriyet daily, and which government also labeled us treasoners and terrorists and this kind of stuff. And but now we are clean. Everyone knows what happened, and they know about the hate campaign, and many people tells me that we are proud of you.
Okay.
And
okay. Thank you. Sorry for interrupt, but we have to stop here for next session to continue soon. And you made your point, Nazan, excellently, and Nataša also. Thank you. With this kind of, it is very nice in these difficult times, full of challenges, to hear two colleagues, journalists, being so, having so much trust in our own profession, and decisive to continue. Let's finish in this mood. And please stay with us after the break for next session. It will continue probably in 5 minutes or so. Thank you, Anida. Thank you, Nataša and Nazan. Stay well. Thank you to the audience. goodbye from us.